morning, you are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Asanov, and here are the top stories. US President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron met in White House to discuss a potential peace plan for Ukraine. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan emphasizes his country's potential role in revitalizing the EU's aging economy and workforce. Faithful gathered at St. Peter's Square in Vatican for a prayer service for Pope Francis. There is a slight improvement in Pontiff's condition. US President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron displayed stark differences on Monday in their approach to Ukraine. During a day of talks between the two leaders, Trump and Macron showed a friendly rapport based on years of good ties. But Macron made clear he disagreed with Trump on some key issues, as they marked 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022.
Speaking at a joint press conference with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., France's President Emmanuel Macron said that he was hopeful of a turning point on the future of European security. The two leaders met on the third anniversary of the beginning of the Ukraine war.
We want peace. That peace cannot mean capitulation by Ukraine. That peace cannot be a ceasefire with no guarantees. That peace must include the conditions for Ukrainian sovereignty.
Macron warned on Monday that peace cannot mean the, quote, surrender of Ukraine, but said that talks with U.S. President Donald Trump has shown a path forward. President Trump said that he was pleased to hear from President Macron that the cost and burden of securing the peace in Ukraine must be borne by the nations of Europe, not alone by the United States.
Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent peace. My meeting with President Macron today was another important step forward in that sphere.
President Trump repeated his concern at the press conference that the war in Ukraine could eventually evolve into a third world war, and he vowed that he would never let that happen. President Macron said that the progress has also been made in reaching an agreement with the U.S. on security guarantees for Ukraine. The French are proposing a European security force to be deployed in Ukraine once a peace deal with Russia is signed.
Once there is a solid, durable, negotiated peace signed by Ukraine and Russia, of which we will collectively be guarantors, France has worked with the United Kingdom to say, we are ready to contribute.
Macron was confident that the U.S. would show solidarity for such a plan and said that Trump had confirmed that he will meet with President Zelensky soon to finalize the agreement on critical minerals and rare earth. That has been a key demand by Washington. That agreement has also been a sore point of contention between President Zelensky and Trump.
I believe that Emmanuel agrees with me on many of the most important issues. Chief among them is this is the right time. It may be the only time,
I also came here to transmit a very clear message of European commitment. We are committed to building a lasting peace. We are committed as Europeans to being involved in these security guarantees.
So overall, a very positive and warm atmosphere here in Washington, D.C. between the French and American leaders, with Macron attempting to bridge the divide between Zelensky and Trump and reaching a mutually acceptable way forward for Ukraine. Amube Shabander, Washington, D.C., A News.
The UN Security Council adopted a US-drafted resolution that takes a neutral stance on the war, coinciding with President Donald Trump's efforts to broker peace. The resolution's passage follows amendments made by General Assembly to support Ukraine, which were seen as a victory for European nations.
The United Nations Security Council adopted a US-drafted resolution that takes a neutral position on the conflict in Ukraine. It comes as US President Donald Trump seeks to broker an end to the war. This decision came after the General Assembly added supportive language for Ukraine to the US draft, which European nations viewed as a victory amid concerns about recent American engagement with Russia. Russia's UN ambassador Vasily Nebenzia acknowledged constructive changes in the US position on the conflict. He told the Council the resolution was not an ideal one, but a starting point for future efforts towards peaceful settlement. Meanwhile, he accuses Western nations of blaming Russia for the crisis.
И пусть сегодня западноевропейские спонсоры режима Зеленского по-прежнему пытаются его выгораживать.
And even though today the Western European sponsors of the Ukrainian regime continue to shield him and continue to pin all blame for the Ukrainian crisis on Russia without considering everything that the Kiev regime has been doing, as it has been seeking to provide cover for its bankrupt client, as we saw in today's vote in this chamber on the US draft resolution, it is becoming increasingly more difficult for them.
The original US draft recognized the loss of life in the conflict and called for a quick end to the war, emphasizing the UN's role in maintaining peace. However, European amendments stressed Russia's full-scale invasion and underscored the need for a just and lasting peace, reaffirming support for Ukraine's sovereignty. Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister Mariana Betsa criticized America's original resolution for not labeling Russia's actions as aggression and rejected negotiations that exclude Ukraine.
The myth of Russia's military invincibility has been shattered. What was once seen as an unstoppable force has been met with resilience, courage, and determination, reinforced by the unwavering support of the free world. We need to reconfirm that the aggression should be condemned and discredited, not rewarded. Our position must include substantive elements and ensure that any future peace initiatives aligns with the principles of the UN Charter.
The amended resolution received 93 votes in favour, 73 abstentions and 8 votes against. The original US drafted resolution gained 10 votes in favour with no votes against and 5 abstentions from France, the UK, Denmark, Greece and Slovenia. French Ambassador Nicolas de Rivière explains why his country didn't vote for the US draft.
France did not vote in favour of the draft resolution presented by the United States. Indeed, while we are fully committed to peace in Ukraine, we call for comprehensive, just and lasting peace, and certainly not for capitulation of the victim.
Et certainement pas à la capitulation de l'agressé.
US Chargé d'Affaires Dorothy Shea defended the resolution, reaffirming the US commitment to ending the war. Earlier, the General Assembly approved a separate Ukrainian resolution with 93 votes in favour and 65 abstentions, indicating a decline in support compared to previous votes that had seen more than 140 nations condemn Russia's actions. American Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo says since the invasion began, at least 12,654 civilians have been killed, including 673 children, and 29,392 have been injured.
As Ukraine entered the 4th year of its war with Russia, about a dozen leaders from Europe and Canada came to Kiev on Monday to reaffirm their support for Ukraine. Among the gathered were presidents of the European Commission and the European Council, leaders of Canada, Denmark, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, Norway, Sweden and Spain. Leaders of 11 other countries, including Britain, Japan, Turkey and 8 European nations, spoke via video link to the Support Ukraine Forum. There was no immediate sign of US presence at the event.
Дорогі друзі, цей рік повинен стати роком початку.
Dear friends, this year must become a year to mark the start of a real solid peace. Putin will not gift us this peace. He will not give it away in exchange for something. We must achieve peace through force, wisdom and unity in our cooperation.
Співпрацею.
We must do everything in our power to enable Ukraine to secure a just and lasting peace, a peace that cannot be achieved without Ukrainians at the table. That is precisely what Canada is focused on.
The war in Ukraine remains the most central and consequential crisis for Europe's future. Putin is trying harder than ever to win the war on the ground. His goal remains Ukraine's capitulation, and we know what could happen next, because it has already happened before. It is not only the destiny of Ukraine that is at stake, it is Europe's destiny that is at stake.
If we now allow Russia to do what it wants to do, in other words, stop the existence of a Ukrainian state, then it's not only Ukraine that has lost, it's Europe that's lost, it's the West that has lost, and also the United States that has lost.
Across the globe, people are continuing to show their support for Ukraine on the third anniversary of Russia's invasion. Demonstrations have been held in major cities on Monday, such as London, Paris and New York, with protesters calling for ongoing aid and a resolution to the conflict.
Rallies in support of Ukraine have continued worldwide, with demonstrators marking the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. The rally coincided with talks between US President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron at the White House. In New York City, hundreds gathered in Times Square on Monday, calling for global solidarity.
I'm here today in New York City, on Times Square, to send message to all world. The war in Ukraine is total injustice. The world leaders is a weakness, and they are doing everything just for them agenda and political ambition.
Meanwhile, in London, over 1,000 people gathered in Trafalgar Square, including many Ukrainians living in the UK.
Be here tonight with you to mark the third anniversary.
Berlin also saw thousands march to the Brandenburg Gate, with demonstrators making stops at the Russian embassy.
I hope that the new elected government will continue to supply weapons to Ukraine, that it will work together with the European states to ensure that a major counterweight to Russia, and now also to Trump, is developed, that they also start a joint army, for example, that all European states support Ukraine, even if, for example, Orban does not join in, or other nationalist countries.
In Warsaw, both Ukrainians and Poles protested, voicing not only their support for Ukraine, but also criticism of Trump's remarks that blamed Kyiv for not stopping the fighting.
Honestly, this came as a shock to me, because I have always thought that the United States, as a democratic country, as a country who values freedom, would support the Ukrainian fight. But as for me, I think that this is unacceptable to not blame Russia for starting this war. This is unacceptable to blame Ukraine for, making this war happen. This is a false rhetoric that just should not sound in the democratic world.
In Paris, the Eiffel Tower was illuminated in Ukraine's blue and yellow colours as a symbol of solidarity. As the war enters its fourth year, it's Ukraine's civilians who endure the hardships that war has brought on the nation, with more than 10 million people forced to leave their homes and thousands who've lost their lives.
The European Union has approved its 16th package of sanctions against Russia. The latest package hits Russia's energy, trade, transport, infrastructure and financial services. EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas said that the latest round of restrictions hits everything from shadow fleet ships to gaming controllers that are used to control drones. Kallas said that the EU now has the most extensive sanctions ever, weakening Russia's war effort. 3 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, sanctions remain a key weapon against Moscow. Russia is the most sanctioned country in history, yet its economy endures as pressure mounts and strategies evolve. Here is how the battle beyond the battlefield unfolding.
Пресловутые санкции.
Blocking sanctions.
Range of sanctions.
Ein Sanktionspaket.
Our sanctions.
Нові санкції проти Росії.
21,692. This number reflects the sanctions that made Russia the most sanctioned country in history. Russia declared Donetsk and Luhansk independence, and sanctions poured in. The US, EU, UK, Canada, Japan and Australia acted swiftly. Sanctions were imposed targeting Russian sovereign debt transactions. Lawmakers who backed Donetsk and Luhansk recognition, VEB and Pромsvязьбанк, two key state-owned banks. 2 days later, on 24 February, a war that would end millions of lives began. More sanctions followed. The decision to cut off certain Russian banks from SWIFT was announced on 26 February. $300 billion in foreign reserves were frozen. Oil and gas exports were restricted. Western companies withdrew overnight. March 2022. Western leaders pushed for further restrictions. By June 2022, the EU approved a phased ban on Russian oil. The G7 followed with a price cap. Yet, Russia found new buyers. A shift away from the West. A new initiative, BRICS Pay, was introduced to bypass SWIFT and reduce reliance on the dollar. By mid-2023, Russia found ways to sustain trade despite restrictions. Oil exports continued via a shadow fleet of tankers. Crude reached China and India despite price caps. And in 2023, Russia's economy did not collapse. It grew. GDP increased by 3.6%. Unemployment hit a record low of 2.3%. Yet, beneath the numbers, difficulties persisted. Inflation surged, the ruble weakened. For ordinary Russians, the reality was stark. Rising food prices, a decline in imported goods. In December 2023, the G7 and EU introduced penalties on shipping and insurance firms. By early 2024, Western leaders debated pressure versus negotiation, but sanctions remained the preferred tool. The US tightened restrictions on Russian energy exports, yet Moscow adapted again. Three years later, a war without resolution. Sanctions persist, the war continues. January 2025, Donald Trump returned to the White House, aiming to ease tensions between the US and Russia. On the other hand, Western nations tightened enforcement on sanctions evasion. The US targeted Russian petroleum services. The UK froze assets of 6 Russian officials. As sanctions mounted, late March 2025 brought a shift in Washington. In Donald Trump's second term, Washington began considering partial sanctions relief. The US president invited Russian officials to the table, leaving Ukraine out, and almost signaled possible easing of sanctions on Moscow. Not all allies agreed. European nations resisted any rollback. One way or another, the issue remained unresolved. As efforts to end the war faltered, the hope of many endured. Because no matter how long the winter, spring is sure to follow.
Russian President Vladimir Putin extended an offer to the United States on Monday for joint exploration of Russia's rare earth metals deposits, along with aluminum supplies to the U.S. market. The Kremlin says the production of the new materials is vital for the country's future competitiveness and economic development. Russia has the world's 5th largest resources of rare earth metals, according to the U.S. Geological Survey data. Putin's offer came soon after U.S. President Donald Trump announced that major economic development transactions with Russia were on the horizon.
Take advantage of the American people,
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reaffirmed Washington's commitment to its partnership with Saudi Arabia during a meeting with Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman at the Pentagon. The talks come as Riyadh takes on a growing diplomatic role, recently hosting U.S. and Russian officials to discuss the war in Ukraine. Hegseth emphasized Saudi Arabia's role in regional security and thanked the kingdom for facilitating high-level negotiations.
Americans. Our relationship is a critical center of gravity in a very turbulent region in the world. So I want to thank the kingdom also more specifically for hosting important discussions between the United States and Russia as we pursue one of President Trump's top priorities, which is bringing peace to the war in Ukraine. And I also want to continue deepening and strengthening our partnership to pursue security and prosperity for both Americans and
Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has made a statement regarding the European Union, saying that only Turkey can rescue the bloc from what he describes as a deadlock in areas such as the economy and defense. Speaking after a cabinet meeting in Ankara, Erdogan emphasized Turkey's potential role in revitalizing the EU's aging economy and workforce. He argued that Turkey could provide a much-needed lifeline to the EU as it grapples with economic stagnation and demographic challenges. According to Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey is eager to advance its membership process based on mutual benefit and respect with a constructive approach. Turkish President further highlighted that significant progress could be achieved swiftly if the necessary political will is demonstrated. However, he cautioned the EU and its key member states against repeating past mistakes that have hindered Turkey's accession process. Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif arrived in Baku for a two-day visit and met with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Several agreements and memorandums were signed, and President Aliyev announced that Azerbaijan is ready to invest a minimum of $2 billion in Pakistan.
Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif, arrived in Azerbaijan for a state visit, marking a significant step in the growing strategic partnership between the two nations. The visit began with an official welcoming ceremony, where President Ilham Aliyev received the Pakistani leader. The event, held in a square adorned with the national flags of both countries, featured an honorary guard and the playing of the national anthems. Later, a one-on-one meeting was held between the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, and the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif. President Ilham Aliyev and Prime Minister Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif made statements to the press. A document exchange ceremony took place between the two countries. A memorandum of understanding was exchanged between the state oil company of Azerbaijan SOCAR and Frontier Works Organization, Pakistan State Oil Company Limited, and Pakistan Refinery Limited. Additionally, a memorandum of understanding was exchanged between SOCAR Trading SA and Pakistan's Pakistan State Oil Company Limited, as well as a long-term oil product purchase and sale agreement between SOCAR Trading SA and Pakistan State Oil Company Limited. Furthermore, a memorandum of understanding on cooperation in culture, tourism, urban planning, education, science, economy, and other relevant fields between the city of Nakhchivan of the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic of Azerbaijan and the city of Lahore of the Punjab province of Pakistan was signed. As part of the visit, Azerbaijan and Pakistan have also signed multiple agreements to enhance bilateral cooperation across various sectors. Key deals include an MOU on electronic customs data exchange, an agreement on plant quarantine and protection, and a cooperation pact in agriculture. Additionally, both nations committed to environmental protection, scientific research, and vocational education partnerships, further strengthening their strategic ties. A broader meeting was also held between the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, and the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif.
I officially announced that Azerbaijan is ready to invest minimum $2 billion in different projects in Pakistan. We already got the list of these projects relatively recently, and our teams are evaluating. So we put with my brother a target of 1 month to finalize everything and to give us report on that. Our relations really have importance not only for our peoples, but also for the regions we represent. I think these brotherly ties between Pakistan and Azerbaijan is a good example of partnership between two brotherly Muslim countries.
Your last visit to Pakistan strengthened our bilateral relations immensely. And the people of Pakistan were hugely inspired and happy on your visit. And I think the people of Azerbaijan and the people of Pakistan, their hearts beat together. And I say this with all sincerity at my command. And you have been always a great friend of Pakistan. You love people of Pakistan.
Later, the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Pakistan participated in the Azerbaijan-Pakistan Business Forum held in Baku.
One of Azerbaijan's main water sources, the Araz River, has been facing ecological problems for years. Various reports and investigations highlight the growing dangers to local public health and the region's ecosystem due to industrial and mining waste being discharged into the river from Armenia.
The Araz River, a vital water source flowing through Iran, Azerbaijan and Armenia, is now at the center of a major environmental dispute. Iran is preparing to use this river to supply drinking water to Tabriz and nearby cities. But alarming reports suggest the water may be contaminated with heavy metals, raising serious health concerns. A recent investigation by Iranian environmental media reveals that pollution in the Araz has been a concern for over 15 years. Official documents indicate that heavy metals such as lead, arsenic and molybdenum have been detected in the river, elements linked to industrial waste. Iran's Minister of Energy says the 135-kilometer pipeline project to supply drinking water to 2.5 million people. But opposition is growing. Lawmakers and environmental groups are urging authorities to conduct more thorough water safety assessments before moving forward. Experts warn that Armenia's power plants and mining operations are releasing hazardous chemicals into the river. A 2022 study by Iran's Chamber of Commerce even linked pollution to Armenia's Metsamor nuclear power plant, raising concerns about potential radioactive contamination. The Iranian government insists it is in talks with Armenia about pollution issues, but so far no major steps have been taken to clean the river. Last year, Iran and Armenia signed an agreement to clean up the Araz River within a year, but so far, little progress has been made. Environmentalists warn that if urgent steps are not taken, the damage to the river's ecosystem could become irreversible, posing a major threat to water security in the region.
Experts say investigations show that there is a negative impact on water quality and agriculture. Togrul Velikanlı explains the legal implications.
The pollution of rivers and lakes has a special place or attention under the auspice of environmental crime concept. Nowadays, the environmental crimes are considered to be a big disaster. Of course, there are plenty of cases or examples of environmental crimes which were committed by Armenia. For example, Okhchu-Chay transborder river, which flows to the Araz River, and as you know, Araz River is the second largest river in the South Caucasus region. So the pollution of this river directly affects the quality of water resources and irrigating agricultural fields. The discharge of heavy metals in the river, which was made by the Kajaran copper molybdenum plant and Gafan ore processing plant in Armenia, many times more than norm. And it doesn't only destroy the ecosystem and fauna, but same time it's dangerous for human health It should be not about the convention on the law of non-navigational uses of international water courses adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1997. The second legal instrument is the Convention on the Protection and Use Transborders Water Courses and International Lakes, which was adopted in 1992. In a nutshell, it's Helsinki Convention, and interestingly, Armenia hasn't joined to this convention until yet. And in this context, it's particularly important to note about the arbitration case, which was brought by Azerbaijan before the Permanent Arbitration Court in Haga against Armenia, pursuant to the Convention on the Conservation of European Wildlife and Natural Habitats of 1979. It's called Berne Convention.
And over in Spain, unseasonably warm temperatures have led to an early blossom of almond trees. Officials are blaming the phenomena on climate change.
Almond trees in northeastern Spain started to bloom in late January, roughly 3 weeks earlier than usually expected. Officials of the country believe that it is due to unseasonably warm temperatures caused by climate change.
Climate change directly affects the progress of flowering. We have had several decades of intense winters with cold and fog, with winters that are practically spring-like. This year, for example, we could perhaps count the days that have been frosty with the fingers of one hand.
Spain is one of the world's largest producers of almonds, known for both sweet and bitter varieties. The country's Mediterranean climate, warm, dry summers and mild winters, provides the perfect conditions for almond trees to thrive. Typically, almond trees begin to bloom in early spring, with their white or pink blossoms appearing in February or March. These beautiful flowers signal the start of the growing season, often before the trees even have leaves. Despite the early bloom, many locals and tourists are taking advantage of the situation, flocking to almond tree fields to capture the beauty of the flowers.
So happy when I see all the flowers and the bees and the insects and the trees. That's what we hear.
This year marks the second earliest bloom on record since 1981. As climate change continues to impact agriculture, events like this may become more common, reshaping the future of farming in many countries along with Spain.
Faithful gathered at St. Peter's Square in Vatican on Monday evening for a prayer service for Pope Francis, as the Holy See reported a slight improvement in his condition. The service, led by Cardinal Pietro Parolin, marked the first of ongoing nightly prayers for the Pope's health. A Vatican medical update confirmed that the 88-year-old kidney issue is not a cause for concern. Despite his health struggles, Pope Francis is still scheduled to lead Easter celebrations next month, according to Vatican officials. That's all for now. Thank you for joining us. Keep watching A News.